American democracy is alive and kicking. There is no overstating this. This week was a very, very bad week for Republicans and a very, very good week for America. There were absolutely massive wins in elections all over this country. Massive. Up and down the ballot. Ohio, Virginia, Kentucky, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Minnesota. A message was delivered to the party of Donald Trump this week, and the message was this: F off. Democracy ain't dead. It's alive and kicking. It just has to kick a little bit harder these days. Okay, a lot harder. But let Ohio be yet another lesson to all of you supposedly pro-life Republicans. Do not F with the rights of American women, because we will not have any of it. So sorry. And let Iowa, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, and Minnesota be a message to all those book-banning, history whitewashing moms for liberty. You got your butts kicked everywhere. Your extremism was rejected. You're not fooling anyone. You're not some grassroots org advocating for parental rights. You're not for liberty. You're fear-mongering, crisis-creating, outrage manufacturing, GOP-funded propagandists who are using parents and students as pawns to push a far-right agenda under the guise of parental empowerment. And it's total BS. And you just found out. Ain't that something? My guest this week is none other than Michael Cohen, the former fixer and personal attorney to former President Trump, author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, Disloyal, a memoir, and Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics, as well as the host of 2 top-rated news podcasts, Mea Culpa with Michael Cohen, and Political Beatdown on the Midas Touch Network. I always really enjoy my conversations with Michael, and this one is definitely included. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast, Michael Cohen.
Hey, JoJo, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to talk to you again. I feel like we're becoming fast friends.
I know, right? Because you did my podcast on Mea Culpa, just to let you know, incredible numbers. You're much more popular than I am.
I don't know about that, but that's awesome. It's actually one of my favorite conversations I've ever had on any podcast. It was just, I don't know, just feel like strangely like I know you, that we could just shoot the shit and it's like really easy breezy. There's no, pretense or weirdness. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just we're from the same region of the world.
I think so. Maybe it's just similar personality. Right?
Yeah. Which
I think we're both out of our fucking minds, but that's okay.
There's absolutely no question, and we both have something to say. That is for sure, and we're going to say whether or not you want to hear it. So, but speaking of something to say, I want to talk about the New York trial, right? The fraud trial. But first, I want to just sort of look at some historic election victories this week in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, even my state of New Jersey. It's kind of a referendum on MAGA. I want to talk about that a little bit first. What are your takeaways? Okay. Yeah, what are your takeaways on it?
What's my takeaway? My takeaway is that the GOP has once again stuck their foot right up their ass. What they don't see, they're getting it all wrong. And it's fine by me. This is a misconception by too many people that I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. I've been a Democrat basically my entire life. In fact, something a lot of people don't know, go back and look, 1987 and 1988, before you were even born, no. I was working for Congressman Joe Moakley in Washington when I was attending American University. That was really my first foray into U.S. politics. Major Democrat. And I've been a Democrat, as I said, basically most of my life. I did switch parties to Republican, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. So I was friendly with Governor Pataki here in New York, a Republican, a great guy. And a very close friend of mine had asked me if I would consider running for city council. And this was like in 2003. Clearly, I could not run a Democratic ticket because the city council member was already the incumbent and it was a shoo-in for. But they had nobody to run against her. And so Pataki asked me while we were out for dinner one night if I would consider doing it. The only way, of course, to do it would be to switch my party affiliation. And I did. It was exactly the same as Mike Bloomberg had done when he was running for mayor. He switched from Democrat, Independent to Republican, won, and so on.
Right.
Well, as soon as I was done with that, I switched back to Democratic Party. Then, was unfortunately forced by Steve Wynn, yes, the great Steve Wynn, who was the head of the RNC Finance Committee, and I was a vice chair under Steve Wynn, but I was a Democrat. And I didn't tell anybody, and then they ultimately found out, and Steve was like, can't do this, right? People won't give money to you if, in fact, you're a Democrat, even though you're raising it for Donald. So and then, of course, after the election, I switched back. So I am a Democrat. Going back to your question, Republicans keep, making the same mistake over and over and over again. And they're making the same mistake since 2017. They've lost 2017. They lost 2020. They lost 2022. And then they just this midterm, election here for governors and so on, but by a resounding number, including in 3 states that New York Times Siena poll had shown that these swing states are heavily now Republican and anti-Joe Biden. Based on what happened the other night, I don't see it that way. And I don't particularly have much confidence in the poll either.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I really don't put much stock in polling. Everyone's got their hair on fire about those polls that came out over the weekend and show Trump beating Biden, et cetera. Again, I don't put much stock in that. And I think a lot of people counted out maybe Ohio on this, amendment to enshrine reproductive rights into their state constitution. But I think at the end of the day, overall, I think Americans are really, really tired of MAGA and the chaos and the fact that they don't do anything and they don't even listen. Like Americans are saying, we want reproductive rights. We didn't like the Dobbs decision, but the Republican elected officials are like, sorry, we can't hear you. And people are like, you know what? At the end of the day, we're going to make our voices heard. And they're rejecting this extremism that doesn't actually fit what they want. And I think that is, again, a referendum on MAGA, on Trump, on Trumpism, on the extremism of it. And I think they should be very worried based on what we saw.
So 2 points. Yeah, so 2 points on that. First of all, 7 out of 10 Americans believe that Roe should have continued, and it should still be the week before which any decision would have to be made, and it should be consistently left up to the woman in terms of how to handle her pregnancy, her reproductive rights, and so on. 7 out of 10. That's not good for the Republicans, especially Mandarin Mussolini himself comes out and he says, I'm the one who did it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to overturn 50 years. Meanwhile, this is a guy, and I'm telling you, not because we're on adverse sides of the aisle now, and so we've always had our differences regarding certain views. But on that view, we always, when we were together, we were always consistent. Neither Donald or I give a shit what anybody else chooses to do. You be you, let me be me. Me, I happen to be pro-choice. Now, that doesn't mean I have to fight with. It doesn't mean I have to attack someone who's pro-life. I wish you all the best in your pregnancy, in your child, in their life. I wish everybody all the best on that. But he's now taken this far-right position, this ultra Southern white Christian evangelical position that he doesn't truly believe in either. So if you don't really believe in it, which he does not, he's into the crowd, then you can't be effective into it. Where he was effective is he took from the Heritage or Society or the other group that's there, and he took all of their judges. He didn't do any vetting of any of these judges. They handed him a book of which judges that want to take over federal positions of the Supreme Court, and the schmuck just went ahead, one after the other. I like him, I like her, they're great, and so on. I did my job. Now he's taking credit for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And that's not going to inure well for him, because the loss of Roe to America. The loss of Roe to American citizens and to your rights is just the beginning. What it shows is that something that should have been stare decisis, it's been of the land for 50 years now, can be overturned like that, simply based upon a decision by a group of Supreme Court judges, especially the last three, not including Ketanji Jackson, but the three appointed by Trump, who are legitimate maggots, and that they are legitimate evangelical, ideological judges who are not predicating their decisions on law, but rather on theocracy and their religious principles.
Especially Amy Coney Barrett. But it's so interesting because this about Trump being pro-life, it's such a lie. I mean, he was on Meet the Press with Tim Russert forever ago, where he said the opposite. He said that he believed that it was a New Yorker, right? So he said the opposite. He said he believed that it was up to, a woman, that it wasn't, that he wasn't pro-life, that he was pro-choice. So he flipped just conveniently, and it's all part of the fraud, all part of the con, all part of what I call fictional Trump. And so moving to that conversation, because that's part of the con, part of the lie, let's talk about the New York
on the con, right?
Yeah, let's talk about the trial in New York, because really all of this it's business fraud, right? I mean, this is the big lie, the big Trumpian business lie. It's all a fraud and a con, right?
Well, to an end, yes. I mean, look, the guy inherited a shit ton of money from his father, who was enormously wealthy. I mean, he was probably, if they really gave a shit during those times with Forbes and so on, his father would have been on that Forbes list. That's how rich the guy was. But he wanted to fly under the radar. He was a Brooklyn, Queens guy. Donald, of course, wanted to tackle Manhattan because it had to do with his ego. Well, same ego that pushed him into Manhattan is the same ego that decided for him to push up his financial status, or the number to which he was attached to on the Forbes wealthiest individuals list, as high as he can. And those numbers are hyperinflated. And that's really so far what this baseline $250 million civil fraud New York Attorney General case has shown, that the money that he claims to have had, his extraordinary wealth, was not legitimate. Now, most people would be very happy to have $1 billion. I mean, when you start seeing like Powerball for $1 billion, everybody in their mind is already thinking, holy shit, yeah, I mean, Donald was definitely worth $1 billion. There's no doubt of that. But I'll tell you what, he wasn't worth 10. He wasn't worth 8. And his need to hyperinflate his assets was the predicate for, of course, this case, but also what will be his downfall. And I say that because you'll see the testimony that has already come out, and it came out during Ivanka's testimony, that Deutsche Bank, of only 2 banking institutions that were willing to make any loans to him, everybody else ran away from him. So you had Deutsche Bank and Ladder Capital. Now, just as a side note, Ladder Capital, one of the employees, one of the managers of that company, happened to be Jack Weisselberg. And if the last name's familiar, he is the son of Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization. So you really had predominantly Deutsche Bank. And the problem that you have there is, even in Ivanka's testimony, they first wanted $3 billion of actual net worth in order to make a specific loan. They ended up reducing it to 2.5. If in fact he would have, Donald showed them that he was worth 8-9 billion, or maybe even more, which is how he was able to favorable rates. The result of that is something which is called disgorgement, which is they are now going to go back in time, figure out how much that he benefited from the fraud, And New York, through its law of disgorgement, will be able to charge Donald Trump that as a fine. That fine also, of course, carries penalty and interest. The numbers here are going to be far in excess of the minimum that Tish James put in her complaint of 250 million. It's going to be substantially higher.
Holy shit. And like you said, like it's going to be his downfall. This is his narcissism, essentially, right? Because he's like Veruca Salt. He's like every kid in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, because
I want the world.
Right?
I want the world.
Yeah, I mean, he's not sad. He was never satisfied when, as a billionaire, as a New York, like, famous billionaire on the, the ladies, seeing all the things. He would make up stories about Madonna and all that. He wasn't satisfied as the president. He had to go ahead and essentially try and steal that. And it's all driven by his narcissistic ego, his need like to be more. I mean, it's crazy. I've read a lot of stories about him, in the past as a child growing up, etc. But it's so fascinating to me where this comes from.
Well, it's in all fairness, it's very similar to the mythological character of Icarus.
Mm-hmm.
His arrogance and his ignorance got him with his waxed wings to fly too close to the sun, which of course melted the wings and plummeted him to his death. It's the same thing. Right now, his company is in what's known as a death spiral, because as a result of Judge Cohen's decision in the first part of the case, which is the liability portion, they held that the Trump organization committed fraud. The result of that is that the license to operate in the state of New York, which is considering the Trump Corporation is a New York domiciled entity, now been revoked, and neither Donald, Don Jr., Eric, Ivanka, Alan Weisselberg, Jeff McCain, there was a whole slew of people. They will not be able to conduct business. They will not be able to operate a business. I think it's for like 5-year period in the state of New York. So that's a real problem. It's a real problem for them. It's a real problem for the organization. Those assets will ultimately be sold in order to pay off the disgorgement fees that Trump and the organization are going to be held liable for.
It's like death spirals. It applies more, not just his businesses, his whole existence right now. I mean, I had no idea that it was that severe in terms of the penalties, but I was curious about, what your thoughts were, because we've seen them all testify now. And there were different styles. Let's say, I think it's absolutely nauseating that Ivanka got any credit for being calm, as if that's somehow like a measure of, I don't know, adult.
How come I didn't get credit for being calm?
Right.
I mean, okay, there were some exchanges between me and Alina Habba. Alina's problem is, she's trying to be a mini Donald. Mm-hmm. Anyone who has tried to emulate him has gotten burnt, either ended up like myself in prison or lost their license. Look at Rudy Kaludi, drunken Giuliani. Just think about it. Rudy Kaludi, America's mayor, was once as like this icon, this beacon. Now when he walks down the street, people yell at him, they curse at him, he gets zero respect from New Yorkers. And every now and then you'll come across a MAGA moron that will turn around and say, yeah, you keep fighting, Rudy, you keep fighting. Rudy lost his home, right? He still owes money to his ex-wife, Judy. He owes money all over the place. He's going to owe an exorbitant amount of money that he cannot afford to pay. He couldn't even afford to pay his real estate tax. So now they're selling the apartment, a place that the guy's lived for 30 plus years? At his age, walking with that drop foot of his, like the fucking penguin from Batman, like Danny DeVito over-exaggerating a club foot. That's what Rudy Kaludi has become. And it's a shame, because we all know him from 9/11. Now, look, I believe any one of us would have done exactly the same thing. We all would have risen to protecting New York, and to rebuilding and doing everything possible to overcome that, that devastating day. It wasn't us. It was Rudy, and he did it. And he also cleaned up the city. That is inarguable. So he had the ability to go down in history as a very effective mayor and a very effective advocate for public policy and so on. Instead, it will be written on his epitaph, "Here lies a dumb fuck that gave its loyalty to a guy who is like First Avenue, one way. As a result, is laying here with this epitaph, calling him a dumb fuck." Because that's really what.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old adage is true. Everything Trump touches dies. But I don't understand.
Well, actually, that's not the adage. It's everything that Trump touches turns to shit.
That works too. But it's very true. And Rudy, I always make the joke that, like, because of that, the press conference he did in the parking lot of, the Four Seasons landscaping company that was in between what I call a dildo store, a sex shop, and a crematorium. It's like, that's Rudy's existence. It's sort of parked in that purgatory in between those two places. But I don't understand why anyone
with the black shoe polish,
right, God,
dripping down the side of his head. I mean, it's almost like a scene out of Dawn of the Dead. I mean, it's comical, but it's sad at the same time. Again, not to be repetitive, and certainly, I have an issue with Colludi, but it's sad. This is a guy who at one point in time was America's mayor. He's the laughing stock of not just New York, but the entire country, if not the whole world.
Yeah, he was mayor when I lived on the Upper East Side, and it wasn't far from Gracie Mansion. He was mayor at the time, and I had reverence for the place, which is crazy looking back on it now. It's not that I don't have reverence for the building, but that he was the occupant of it, and I had reverence for it. It's pretty insane. But, and he's become a punchline, to say the very least. The COVID fart heard around the world, like you said, the hair dye. And here's my question, though. So we've seen person after person, better than anybody, suffer for their relationship to Donald Trump. Why would anyone do it now? Like Walt Nauta. Walt Nauta is still loyal to Donald Trump. He's still his man at all of his events, and he's been indicted with him in the documents case, and he still thinks somehow that he's going to be a beneficiary of this relationship, and I don't understand that.
Yeah. So the only thing that I can think of for Walt, because he's not. Look, I don't know anything. I've actually never met him, but somewhere along the line, what they're saying is that when Donald wins the presidency, day number one, right after he gets inaugurated, he's going to pardon you from all of this. He's going to protect you. He's going to do whatever is necessary to help you. That's so long as you stay within the circle of Donald's lies, and that you continue to promote the lies, carrying Donald's water, even if that means, like what happened to Paul Manafort, like what happened to Roger Stone, like what happened to Steve Bannon, like what happened to Alex Jones. The same thing that happened to all of these folks, George Papadopoulos. Every single person that is in that inner circle that Trump feels that he could use as a scapegoat, Cohen, he will throw you under the bus and not think twice about it. The man has no regard for anyone. And by the way, that includes his children as well.
Yeah, that's something that I feel like I just don't understand how other people don't see it. I know that people like you and I see it. I know that people who have, more than one firing synapse in their brains see it. But it's not America first with Donald Trump. It's never been America first with Donald Trump. It's always Donald Trump first. This idea that he got indicted, that he's been indicted for them, for the cult, for America, that they believe that, right, and then send them their insulin money because somehow he's a martyr. It's crazy to me how people choose not to see the truth.
Well, remember, Stalin always said that all you need to do is to continue to repeat the lie over and over and over again. And ultimately, the lie becomes the truth. Donald has perfected that. It's funny, if you ever listen to him, and I know most people now are just sick of hearing his voice, but there is something to the way that he speaks. He goes, Then he goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes up. And he goes down. And it's almost like melodic in a way where you start sort of like moving with him when he moves his body to the left and then to the right as he's looking at the teleprompter. But of course, you always know when he's looking straight ahead. Now he's speaking from from his own head, which is a very dangerous place because there's nothing inside the brain of his that makes any sense. Everything is conspiracy. It is Donald is the martyr. He's the victim. That this is all Joe Biden's weaponization of the Justice Department against him because he's the leading GOP candidate, that the polls are all showing that he's going to beat Biden, that he's the end all be all. So the only way that Biden could beat Trump, not the fact that he beat him once legitimately before, and so again, but in Donald's mind and to his maggots, you call them people with you use more of the biological, the synapses of the brain are not firing the necessary amount of what's called acetylcholine, right? That's not reality here. We're talking about morons with 4 teeth and 3 brain cells. That's the only way to describe it. They follow the melody and they sort of get into it and then they listen to it and then they repeat it as if it's gospel when in fact it's just bullshit.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's, again, fictional Trump, that they are willing to believe all of these things to the point where they now say, even if he's in prison, they will still support him. They will still vote for him. And like just thinking of how absolutely and utterly insane that is, it blows my mind. But there's this other thing that they go along with, to your point, when he talks off script, when he looks, straight ahead, and he does this
off
thing
script.
Yeah, he loves authoritarians. He was talking about Kim Jong-un the other night, about I think last night maybe, during his stupid thing during the debate. He loves authoritarians. He loves Putin. He loves Kim Jong-un. It's very scary, and yet his MAGA idiots, I'll call them MAGA idiots, they go along with it too, where they're like, wait a minute, these are people I should admire. It's like, what are you talking about? But he often reveals that, where he talks about Hamas being strong and Hezbollah being strong. It's disturbing.
Yeah, sure, it's disturbing. The worst part about these idiots is that they accept Donald and then they make excuses for him. Okay, yeah, we don't want authoritarianism in America. We also don't want socialism. We don't want wokeism. So they're willing to decide the fact that he has these absolute autocratic ideology. They're willing to put that aside. And why? Well, just look at, for example, the rally yesterday it was like 10 miles or so from where the debates were being had. The fact that a presidential candidate, a leader right now of the GOP, has refused to appear for 3 debates should be a disqualifier by the GOP. Let him run as an independent. But if I am the head of the GOP, like Ronna Romney McDaniel, I would say, fuck that. You're not going to show up to our GOP presidential debates so that we can have the best possible candidate for our party? Mm-hmm. How is it that you could disrespect your party so? In fact, to counter program at the exact same time, you realize that he has hurt everybody in the down ballot all across this country, time and time again, but they just make excuses for him. And why? Well, again, look at the rally. So always over his right shoulder, camera left is what we call it, there's always at least one black person. Now that person, is on the payroll. And then every now and then you'll see like 5 or 6 or 7 people off to the side. What you'll find is that once again, it's the same thing. There's one black person to the right. And that's it. The reason why, that person, of course, is also on the payroll. Probably the same company. All of Donald's rallies look like Klan meetings. It is all vanilla. There is no diversity in Donald's orbit. And why? Because that's who he appeals to. What he's doing is he's promoting white privilege. And these folks are very happy with that privilege. That they, no matter what, I don't care that, for example, Oprah Winfrey is worth like $3 billion, $4 billion. I don't care that, this individual who's Black is worth, $1 billion or five, whatever the number is. I'm still white. I have that white privilege mentality, and they don't want to give it up, and reinforces that on an ongoing and consistent basis. Look at just the things that he says. Look at what he does. He codes up to our adversaries, all at the expense of who? Our allies. Netanyahu is no good. Macron was no good. Trudeau is no good. Meghan Merkel at the time.
Angela
Merkel. That's another one. That's a little error there, right?
Not a head of state for sure.
Angela Merkel, right? Angela Merkel was. Could you imagine? It was like on the presidential stage, and I used Meghan Markle instead of Angela Merkel. It is. This one's no good. That one's no good. But you know who is good? Kim Jong-un. Mm-hmm. It's a love affair. Mm-hmm. Or Xi Jinping. He's a great friend. Or you got Vladimir Putin. Who's smarter than him, right? I mean, just look at Mohammed bin Salman. That's okay. He just chopped up an American, right? Jamal Khashoggi. And there was no repercussion. Zero. And who's the first person MBS calls after that? Jared Kushner. I mean, the whole thing is just wacky. It's just out of control. And the amount of grift that was going on in that White House for the benefit of Emily, the fact that Ivanka and Jared in their 4 years in the White House pulled down over $640 million. It's absurd.
Especially when you're looking at a trial in New York that's already been, they've already been found liable of business fraud. Are people supposed to assume that they committed decades of business fraud when they were, private citizens, but they stopped once they got into the White House? Like, what? Of course, that makes a ton of sense. But again, it's all part of this, back to what you just said, because of that white privilege thing. And we talked about this when I was on your podcast about how they're willing to just believe whatever it is that allows them to continue to embrace his legitimization of them being, white nationalists, essentially, of them being racist and thinking that their birthright makes them superior. He gives them that power, and for that they will reward him with the undying loyalty. But here's the big problem for Republicans, as we now know repeatedly: this is not a winning message on a national scale. Republicans keep losing. The more they tether themselves to this weight, the more they lose. And I think there's a race against time for how much they can cheat and gerrymander versus what the actual electorate wants, which is to keep them out of government. But it's like Trump will get the nomination. MAGA they'll win in primaries. But beyond that, it's a dead weight.
Yeah, as they like to say, he's the albatross around of the GOP. That's just what he is. Yeah.
And I'm not giving them I don't want to give them any points or tips. But again, as this Tuesday's elections showed, that is definitely a losing message, but good luck there, Republicans. Okay, that concludes the normal portion of our conversation, which normal, regular. Now we go to the totally random question round. Are you ready, Michael Cohen? Okay.
Yeah, now I'm ready.
Okay, cool. These are very serious questions. Of Donald Trump's children, which one would last longest in a zombie apocalypse?
Don Jr.
Really?
Yeah. He's Don Jr. Don Jr. is a natural. He got that from his grandfather, and I'm referring to Ivana's dad, who was an avid hunter, instilled into Don, legitimate hunting skills. Though Don would say that Eric is a better, but Don is more animalistic. I mean, you may recall when Don and Eric went hunting, and this is funny though, and it needs a little bit of a backstory here. They went hunting of animals, from an elephant to a leopard, and you could go online, you could see Don and Eric's hunting extravaganza. I can only tell you when they finally got back, because they didn't tell their father, and he of course saw, because animal activists were going just ballistic at the brutality. Don Jr. cut off the elephant's tail, and he had it, hanging around Eric and Don. They had this leopard, dead, of course, over their shoulder, buffalo, bison, etc. Donald hated it, and he wanted to throw them both out the window. He was so angry at them. But all of a sudden, whoa, slow the fuck down. All of a sudden, the NRA, through Don and Eric, because they're both avid hunters, all of a sudden they take a liking to the Trumps, and they become one of his biggest advocates. And to this day, Donald's all about Second Amendment. Donald fucking hates guns. Now, he has a license to carry, but he's also had security always. He hated the fact that Don and Eric used to go hunting. This is what he would say, and I'm not making this up. This is what he would say. Oh, two big fucking tough guys. You're sitting there hiding behind a tree with a $10,000 gun, and the thing is dead. You're a big man. He goes, go kill the animal with a knife. Go take him. And Don would say, oh, I could kill an animal with a knife. Eric, on the other hand, kept his mouth shut. But Don could actually do it. Don would actually fight a leopard with a knife, because that's just his. He's animalistic in that way.
My God, that was so many layers of holy shit. I mean, yeah, again, no. Again, it just speaks to the fraud, the fictional Trump, that he's this big Second Amendment guy.
Donald hates guns. Always did. He's not a Second Amendment guy any more than he is, pro. He just doesn't care.
Yeah, and he got that gun engraved or something. There was I forget what it was recently, where they put his name on it in maybe South Carolina or something, and he wasn't legally allowed to carry because of his indictments. I can't remember what state it was, but maybe it was Georgia, right? I guess I don't know how that all works, but that is fascinating. And I love that Eric would be like, I don't know. Okay. This is not a Trump related question. This is just a nostalgic related question. What was your favorite TV show as a little kid, and why?
Wow. My favorite TV show as a kid.
Yeah.
Had obviously a lot of them. I mean, there was, of course, you had The Love Boat, and then of course after that you had Fantasy Island.
Friday night, yeah.
Shows like that. I mean, I love The Jeffersons. I love Archie Bunker. I love Sanford and Son. I mean, there really wasn't that many. I didn't like really. One Day at a Time. Okay. Obviously Happy Days. It has to be. And, I happen to be friendly with Henry Winkler. He was on my Mea Culpa podcast. I can't remember if people always had. You and Henry Winkler look alike. No, we don't. But, maybe we have the same airline. But people have been saying that to me my whole life. He's the nicest man that you will ever meet. And I was very friendly with Scott Baio for many, many years. In fact, I brought Scott Baio into the Trump camp.
No.
And what kills me is I don't speak to him anymore. He has gone so far right. I can't understand it. The Scott Baio that I knew for years, I can't believe it's the same person. You can't.
Yeah, he's from this area, right? I don't know if he's from Long Island. He's not from New Jersey. I feel like he's from this area somewhere. But yeah, Henry's going to be on my podcast in December, which is on this podcast.
Well, you ask him.
You're right. One of the nicest human beings on the planet.
And he's so open and honest. I don't know if you know this, but he's dyslexic. And severely dyslexic. He'll tell you all about that. And it's funny because I never knew that. So, yeah, I mean, I just enjoyed the time with him. He is a truly remarkable, just a heartfelt guy. So those are a whole slew of my favorites.
Yeah,
Let's not forget Saturday mornings, the Justice League, along with like the Shazam ISIS hour. I mean, as kids, like that. But I will tell you, I was a little bit strange as a kid. I loved all the shows that everybody else watched, except for, and remember, I grew up from nursery through fourth grade in a yeshiva, wearing a yarmulke, sit. Half the day was Hebrew, half the day was English. I couldn't take it after fourth grade. But Sundays, I glued to Oral Roberts at the Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I could not get enough of Oral Roberts preaching. I swear on my life, I was fat. And Billy Graham, and then followed by Jerry Falwell, which was hysterical, that ultimately I became, and still am to this day, incredibly close with Jerry Falwell Jr., as well as, with his wife. It's funny, but I was glued to the evangelical or the televangelists on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Then of course, when that was over, Abbott and Costello.
That was, I think, PIX probably played those, right? I think it was Channel 11 or Channel 9, I forget. But
I don't know. There were only 4 channels.
Yeah, but I remember Sunday mornings would start, and maybe I'm really dating myself here with this cartoon, but it was like a claymation cartoon called Davy and Goliath. I think.
Yep, Davy and Goliath. But that was from the Seventh Day Adventists. But Davy, those were the best. I mean, I had to watch it because I also, I didn't sleep much even as a child, and so what else are you going to do? Yeah, I would read. I had thousands of comic books. I was a big comic book collector, as a kid, and baseball cards. So after going through your comic books and so on, you watch television, and Davy and Goliath. They always had those great little, religious teachings. It was a bad form of Gumby.
Exactly. It's weird because it's one of those very murky memories of mine from childhood that I'm like, but did I watch that? And some of it was watched on the one black and white TV we had in our kitchen, which is even more telling on myself about my age. Okay, last question. If your Twitter account, I still call it Twitter, you and I still probably both call it Twitter. If your Twitter account got hacked, and what's the one thing the hacker could write that would definitely signal to people that it wasn't you?
Wow. Look, anything towards Trump, I suspect, or any of those sycophantic fools that keep following him. I mean, anything positive aside, they would know that it's clearly not me, that the account has been hacked.
Yeah, what an interesting arc from where the public first became aware of you to that point, where that would be a big tell that your account had been hacked. I mean, I another time we'll have that conversation about what I was going to ask you. We didn't get to it, but that's fine. What damage that relationship has done to your life and to your family. But, suffice it to say, again, if you said something positive about him now, it would be the tell that you had been hacked, because that's the journey that this whole thing has taken for you. But I'm not glad that you've been on that journey, but I'm glad to have made this connection now to you on this side of that journey.
No, well, okay. I appreciate that. It's a horrible journey. I mean, I wouldn't wish this journey, to be honest with anyone. Come December 14th, as an example, I brought a lawsuit against the United States government, the Department of Justice, Trump, Bill Barr, and a whole bunch of other people. Something a lot of people don't know, I am the first political prisoner held by this country, by my own country, because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right. So I went down to 500 Pearl Street, met with a guy named Adam Pakula, he's a low-level guy, along with his boss, who was also low-level, but his boss, Enid Phoebus, and she's now since retired down to Florida to MAGA country. And I was supposed to go there to sign some papers, which interesting of itself that nobody else that I had ever spoken to who had gone through this process had been over to 500 Pearl Street, which coincidentally is the criminal court building. Normally, you go to a facility in the Bronx called GEO, and they have the connection to the Bureau of Prisons. for ankle monitoring, signing, and paperwork. They wanted me down at 500 Pearl Street. And it didn't sound normal. So I asked a buddy of mine, Jeff, who's a lawyer, if he'd do me the favor and come down with me. Something seemed wrong. Well, we go down there. They hand me a 2-page document, ask me to read it and sign it. And number one was that I will not speak to media, will not do television, will not do radio, publish a book, will not do a movie, will not, just all of these very significant constitutional First Amendment restrictions. And both Jeff and I almost simultaneously said to them, hey, this is really heavy-handed. Not to mention my first book, Disloyal, was already with the printer. So I was like, the second I sign this, you realize that I'm going to be in violation. Can we tamp the language down? To which they asked us to read the others, see if we agree with them, and we were fine with them. They were a little restrictive, but I can get past it. They then asked us to wait out in the hallway while they reached out to the superiors. We did. We're sitting there. An hour 20 minutes goes by. All of a sudden, there are 3 marshals, massive guys, massive, handcuffs and shackles. And they handcuff, shackle me, literally, and then remand me back to prison, where I spent another 16 days in solitary confinement with zero movement at all until my lawyer, Danya, absolute genius, she went ahead and she filed these papers. Even Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein, federal judge Alvin K. Hellerstein, Southern District of New York, responded to government. This is the most retaliatory act by a president and a DOJ and the Attorney General I've ever seen in my 30 years sitting on the bench. That he could only rule that it was retaliatory and violative of my First Amendment constitutional right. As a result of the Dobbs decision, where we first started our conversation, not did Dobbs overturn Roe v. Wade, but it also overturned the pivotal case of Bivens, which is the way that you will get redress from the government by suing them for violating your rights. Overturned, Dobbs' decision overturned Bivens, and now is sending it to Congress. Could you imagine? They want Congress or state to figure out how each violation should be handled by either the state or by Congress. Congressional decision. Could you imagine? Congress can't even pass a fucking budget, and they want them to talk about how the president weaponizing the Justice Department through a bloviated asshole Attorney General, Bill Barr, who none of us should give him any credit for anything that he's doing, that they would go ahead and remand a U.S. citizen to prison, violate First Amendment constitutional right because he refused to waive it, based off of a document that they prepared specifically for him. There's so many violations here that it's scary. But Bivens was overturned, and now we're at the appellate court because there is actually a line in the document that was put out by Justice Thomas in the decision, which is, unless it is of the most unusual circumstance. And the entire argument is, what could be more unusual? The president, through a complicit attorney general, weaponizing the Department of Justice to go against a U.S. citizen, remand him to prison because he wouldn't waive his First Amendment constitutional rights. I just don't understand. It's a case that's now taught in law school. It's taught in law schools today. And when we finally get a decision, if we lose, we're going to the Supreme Court. If we win, I guarantee you, government's going to take it to the Supreme Court. This is going to be another case that's going to be on par with Brown versus Board of Education or Plessy versus Ferguson. This is constitutional. It's the First Amendment. The First Amendment. You don't get to the second if you don't have the first.
All right. And the fact that there is literally a committee, a gaslighting committee called the Committee of Weaponization of the Federal Government that is investigating Joe Biden for doing exactly what Donald Trump did. It really just does. It's the hypocrisy.
It's shared by Jim Bag Jordan.
Yeah. I mean, it's all a sham, but again, every accusation is a confession every single time. Wow. I will be watching that. So you've got your podcast, Mea Culpa, which I was on. Thank you so much again for having me on. What else are you working on? You want to direct people to, etc.
So let's see. Obviously, I would ask your viewers, your listeners, my second book, which was number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list, Disloyal was number 1, which is very nice. But number 6, it is a forensic dissection, and they call it the playbook, but it's a forensic dissection of the most corrupt prosecution in the last 100 years, United States citizen, and it outlines through conversations with federal investigators, FBI, federal judges, lawyers, accountants, etc. And it really lays out the entire case and the danger that Donald Trump poses to the United States. I say that Trumpism is fascism, and we must eradicate from our body politic. But on top of that, so I have the book Revenge, which I, again, recommend, a podcast, which is called Mea Culpa, but only subscribe to the one that has the blue background. That's the new RSS feed. The one that has red, that you don't want to, because those are old libraries of Mea Culpa. We've done over 320 some odd episodes. All the new stuff and the really interesting, fun new stuff is on the blue background one. On top of that, I'm going to be doing a live Mea Culpa at City Winery NYC. That'll December 9th, I believe. You could go to citywinery.com or citywinerynyc.com. Just look it up in the shows. I'm going to be doing a live Mea Culpa, and Katie Fang is going to be my guest on live. A lot of fun. It's a very interesting venue. And lastly, I also have a second podcast, which is really on YouTube. It goes live every Tuesday and Thursday from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Again, it's on YouTube. You can look it up through the Midas Touch Network as well. Number 1 in the world in terms of news on YouTube. I mean, it's gotten incredible attention. The numbers of people that watch it live and then watch the recording of it on YouTube, it's astounding. It's called Political Beatdown, and I do that with Ben Mycelis, one of the brothers from the Midas Touch Network. And that's really where I'm at. That, taking care of the wife, the children, trying to still be a good son, good sibling, that I'm not so good at, but, good son definitely for sure, and a good friend, and just trying to deal with a lot of my own issues that prison does to you, the PTSD, other health issues that, as you get old and you get to be my age, you have to contend with the high blood pressure, the achy joints, the torn ligaments. So I got a lot of issues that I need to deal with.
But you're doing great, and you are working on a lot, which is amazing. I mean, just 2 books, just like amazing. And 2 podcasts, forget it. Oh my God, that's incredible. And again, I'm very glad to get to talk to you. I enjoy our conversations a lot.
Yeah, the same. And very soon we'll do the conversation in person.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. And again, thank you, Michael.
Next time I get lost in New Jersey, I find myself like 80 miles deep into New Jersey, wherever where you're at, then I'll be calling. Otherwise, you got to come to the city. That's where all the good stuff is going on.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love the city. And if you got lost here, it would not bode well for you. You would need me to come and rescue you, because I speak.
New Jersey's really strange. I got lost there once going out to Parsippany. My son likes to call Parsippany. But it's in Parsippany. We were going to actually to a ship there, Paul Miller, and so I was going there. We missed the exit somehow, or I made the wrong turn. Everything in New Jersey has a barrier, and it's not even one that you can get through. It's concrete, so you got to just keep going and going and going.
The jug handle,
12 miles past that exit, and now I'm finally able to make a turnaround. So now I got to go 12 miles back. That's miles. I mean, the whole distance from New York to Paul Miller was only 24 miles. So it's, oh my God, and fuck Waze, because in New Jersey, Waze doesn't work.
No.
It's weird. It's like, make a right turn. Well, if I make a right turn, I'm going over the side of the bridge. I mean, it's just, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's funny. I know Paul Miller. I grew up in the town. I grew up in Whippany, which is the town right next to Parsippany. And I know Paul Miller well. But yeah, you're talking about Route 46, which is funny, which goes all the way out, all the way west, basically to PA, and it gets really weird out there. But Jersey's weird. But but we still kept our legislature very blue. So I love you, New Jersey, and thank you for that. But with that, this concludes this conversation, this episode of the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast. Michael Cohen, once again, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody out there, I am launching a new thing started yesterday. I'm going to have like little under 5-minute rants, shorts. You can look for those everywhere you find my podcast. So on YouTube and all the other places. That's a new thing. And I guess that concludes this episode. So everybody have a great week, and I'll see you next weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Look, I think we can all agree, if we can't agree on much else, that these are pretty crazy times, and navigating all of that every day can be pretty stressful. In my case, add 2 middle schoolers, and there are just some days where I'm dragging myself across the finish line. And then there are the nights when a glass of wine or two fits the de-stress bill. But let's be honest, I'm a busy mom. I can't be waking up feeling like crap, whether that's that second glass of wine I had or eating my daughter's leftover chicken fingers because I didn't want them to go to waste. Either way, enter ZBiotics. Here's how you use it. Step 1, have a ZBiotics. For best results, make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow, wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic, your first drink of the night for a better tomorrow. Engineered by a team of PhD microbiologists, ZBiotics is a probiotic drink that breaks down the byproduct of alcohol, which is what's responsible for those rough mornings after drinking. So go to zbiotics.com/politicalvoices or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use Political Voices at checkout. Again, go to zbiotics.com/politicalvoices or scan the QR code on the screen right now.